Welcome back to another edition of the NBA Lockdown Podcast. Got Bruce Bowen. I'm Israel Gutierrez. We're going to preview a couple of games here, and we're starting with Heat Nets Game 2.
This is going to be a long series, so, it's just one game, and, we got to put it behind us. But we got something we can go off of now and look at some game film and, be better prepared in Game 2.
That was Joe Johnson shortly after Miami won Game 1, 107-86. Bruce, we talked yesterday about how Miami did what they did in that game, how they were really dedicated to moving the ball, and the offense, once that loosened up, it was a bit of a free for all toward the end. You got LeBron James really getting to the rim and just pumping his chest and showing off how strong he is against a team that fancies themselves as a bunch of veterans who can play physical basketball. So that had to feel good for him, but you're going to expect more. You're going to expect more of a physical mentality from the Nets. You're going to expect them to really try to get their message across in terms of how they play and get their style of play to really be a factor in this series for more than just a half like it was in Game 1. But how do they do that? Because they tried working through Joe Johnson. I suggested yesterday they go a little bit more through Sean Livingston. But in the end, they're a team that's not going to be able to score a bunch of points. You're never really going to see a 105-100 game in this series unless the Heat just forget how to play defense. So how do the Nets try to just either score more or really limit Miami? Because I would guess that would be the easier way to go for them, is trying to limit Miami a little bit more.
Yeah, but they're going to have to do it in the defensive half court, Izzy. They took away transition baskets from them in that game. I believe the Heat, I don't think they scored over 10. I think it was 8. But that's one of the battles that you have when you play the Miami Heat. You want to make sure you limit transition baskets. But it was within the half court that the Miami Heat were able to execute and get the great ball movement. Let's face it. Playoff basketball is about adjustments. Each game there's an adjustment. You have to adjust to what you think the other team is going to do. Eric Spoelstra last year told me that, Bruce, every single game we had to make an adjustment. Pop was he was the best at it as far as, making us react to the things that he was doing. So the Nets are going to have to make an adjustment. And one of the adjustments, first and foremost, is the defensive rotations. It's really getting the guys engaged where they got to be on point. You have to be almost one pass ahead or thinking one pass ahead as compared to what Miami's doing. You can encourage the one-on-one play with the Miami Heat, but when that ball's moving and they realize what they're getting from that keeps them from going into those modes. You're going to have the opportunities with Dwayne at times and LeBron and the focus of them, but on the defensive side, you really gotta think one pass ahead, and then on offense, it's more about getting more efficiency from all your players. It's not just one particular guy, but you got to get to the free throw line. So you got to be aggressive going to the basket. Paul Pierce can still drive the basketball and get great things at it. He had one layup where I was like, ooh, that looked like old Paul Pierce. But you got to get that more consistent. You can't live by the jump shots and pulling up in one-on-one isolation situations.
I look at this box score again from Tuesday night, and I say Darren Williams is 7 for 10 at 17 points. Joe Johnson 7 for 11, 17 points. You start with that. That's a pretty good starting point if you're Brooklyn, right? Because it's not even including Paul Pierce in that conversation. But nobody else did anything. Nobody else really did anything. Kevin Garnett did almost zero. I mean, he literally scored zero, but added 4 rebounds and a steal in his 16 minutes. And you can assume that Paul Pierce is going to find ways to get more. He can do that on his own more so than a guy like Kevin Garnett can. What in the world can we expect from Kevin Garnett when Jason Kidd's basically going to play him 20 minutes? He's going to utilize him as essentially one of those utility big guys who plays defense and can maybe hit an open jumper or put some offensive rebounds in. Do you think Jason needs to direct more toward KG, really try to get him going? Because if you're just going to utilize him like this, you can have any number of players there, or you could even have somebody with more bulk maybe. rather than just let him be this guy. Like, I feel like he's frustrated, Kevin, but he's not really letting it out.
Yeah, no, but you know what is part of who he is now. I mean, Kevin's older. He's not going to give you, those numbers he did in Minnesota and early in his career in Boston, or I should say early part of the career in Boston. And you basically get so many other things with KD that doesn't necessarily show up in the stat sheet. It's the help. It's the ball movement. It's the recognizing exactly where guys need to be. He's more of the coach on the floor, is he? Because if you start trying to go to Kevin Garnett right now and he's not productive, then you're taking away opportunities and possessions with others that you could have utilized. So I get what Jason Kidd is doing. It's one of those deals where, hey, if things are going great and Kevin's in the game, fantastic. But we're not going to necessarily say, hey, we need to do this with Kevin because we need to get this or need to get that as far as production from him.
You mentioned Kevin Garnett as a coach on the floor. He's more like a coach on the bench. He's just frankly flat out is more like a coach on the bench these days. You see him, and TNT's done a good job. ESPN's done a good job of it too over the last series plus one game, where focusing on him on the bench and how he's doing all the teaching, which is great. But they need more from him on the floor. And again, it's not necessarily all his fault, but they need more from him on the floor because Mason Plumlee was great, had that one, game-saving block against LeBron in the regular season finale, but Mason Plumlee is still a rookie, and he was, 14 minutes, 2 points, 3 rebounds, not exactly the type of production you need from him to complement Kevin Garnett, in this case, complement 0 points, and Andre Blatche, who 1 for 4 in his 12 minutes for 4 points. So they need something out of that center spot, and, while Kevin Garnett would seem to be the best candidate, when you're only playing 20 minutes at most, it's hard for him to produce, especially when, again, not much stuff is running through you. Now, we tend to focus on the losing team, right, to start off a series because you think they're the team that has to make the adjustments. But let's look at what Miami did. They get into that game. They had Udonis Haslem playing in the first series against Charlotte. They had James Jones playing in the first series against Charlotte. This series, they start Shane Battier to give Joe Johnson more of a difficult time or to just match up better. They don't play James Jones at all, which I don't think came as much of a surprise to anybody. And, Udonis Haslem doesn't start or play much either other than some garbage time minutes. And they still have Rashard Lewis and Chris Anderson. Is there anything Miami can do or needs to even think about doing differently in this game? Because to me, that 48 minutes that they played in Game 1 were the best basketball, the best complete game that they've played, maybe even since that game at Oklahoma City. Remember that game a long time ago where LeBron started continued, his late season push toward a possible MVP. It's been almost that long since you've seen that type of game from Miami. Does Miami just kind of stick to it here, or as the winning team, do you look at the film and say, all right, we can do this, this, and this? Like, basically, do the players even listen at that point, or are they just so confident that if they recreate the first game that they're going to get that same result?
No, you don't necessarily change things, Izzy, because you wait to see if there is a necessity to change anything. I agree with you. That game they played, that was the old Miami Heat that we've been accustomed to seeing, especially with the ending of the season the way it did. You just didn't see them quite like that. But I think you look at the film and you look at opportunities where you can get better in certain situations where you're running your offense or where you could have had one more extra pass. This is where coaches get anal. This is where Greg Popovich in a film session during the time, we're feeling good about ourselves, and he's like, no, look at you right here. You need to do a better job of doing X, Y, Z, and then we could possibly, get to that point. And it's one of the hardest things for players because we see it on TV, we see it on the news, we see it in the newspaper, and we feel good about ourselves. And next thing you know, you come out and you lay a fat egg the next game. No, it's important for the coaches to stay on the players and say, what, we got room for improvement, guys, and this is where it starts.
Listen, Bruce, if you're going to lay an egg, it might as well be a fat one, right? You might as well feed a lot of people with that one egg. But, last note on this game is something that I thought, watching the game, it's two teams that really understand basketball, two really veteran teams, and they're going to move the ball. There's going to be moments where you're going to be wowed by the ball movement, and it's going to look like a poor man's version of Heat Spurs last year. Not quite, the Nets aren't quite to the same level that the Spurs are/were. But here's what threw me it was mind-blowing to me, Bruce. There was a lineup at one point for the Nets where you had Paul Pierce, Kevin Garnett, Darren Williams, Joe Johnson, and Sean Livingston. That's starters, right? And then for the Heat, Shane Battier, LeBron James, Chris Bosh, Dwayne Wade, Mario Chalmers. All right, that's their starters. If you take out Mario Chalmers, okay, and put in, let's say, Rashard Lewis, okay, and play those same 10 players 9 years ago, and it would be a phenomenal basketball game. Like, you got Paul Pierce in his prime, Kevin Garnett in his prime, Darren Williams as a rookie, which some could argue was his prime, Sean Livingston before the crazy, that actually might have been right after. My math might have been wrong on that because I think he might have gotten hurt in 2004. But regardless, I mean, go back another year then and take out Darren Williams. Like, it's mind-blowing to me how good this game would have even been if it happened 9-10 years ago. And it just goes to show you how high quality these players are, and how, Ray Allen, that was the other guy. It was Ray Allen in the game. And so, yeah, it sort of reminds you that these guys are so good and they're so consistent, and they manage their bodies so well that they're able to play at a high level, at this high level, even 9-10 years later. Is kind of mind-blowing. So I guess you could appreciate that for what it's worth. These guys that are going to be in this league or have been in this league for a long time and continue to play at such a high level. Speaking of high level, we got one more game to preview. It's the Portland Trailblazers against the high-level playing, that's not a real phrase, San Antonio Spurs. We'll get to that right after this break.
ESPN Radio.
With the action on the court, the diamond, or the gridiron,
comes alive.
The NBA.
The Miami Heat have won the 2013 NBA title.
Major League Baseball.
The Boston Red Sox have won the World Series.
The Bowl Championship Series.
The tide has risen again, the third time in 4 years.
Your home for the best in sports play-by-play.
ESPN Radio.
We're not demoralized. It's learning how to play here. Every series is different, and they came here and they did what they should have done, and I think everybody I'll be better next time.
That was LaMarcus Aldridge after his Portland Trailblazers took a beating in Game 1, 116-92 at the hands of the San Antonio Spurs. That was the second straight just really impressive performance by the San Antonio Spurs, Bruce. And we talked about, how it started with Tony Parker. We talked about that yesterday. Started with Tony Parker, his 33-9, but also his defense and his competitiveness against Damian Lillard, an up-and-coming point guard that Tony wants to say, hey, know your role, buddy. Stay in your lane. It's not your time just yet, even though you hit some big shots. It's Tony Parker's time right now. Can Portland do anything to really bother Tony? I mean, not to give away your good buddy's little secrets or anything, but when he had a more difficult time, what was it that teams did to him? Because, he mentioned, I've had, teams put longer, taller guys against me in the past, and I can handle that. I remember Kobe Bryant, I know you know this. Kobe Bryant used to take on Tony Parker as a defender, when things got tough, or whenever Tony Parker started really showing how good he was. In this series, you can have Wes Matthews was an option. You have Nick Batum as an option, along with Damian Lillard. But if you were coaching against Tony Parker, Bruce, how would you attack him defensively?
The best way that I remember, Izzy, was in 2004. Phil Jackson. We won the first two games. Tony was getting to the paint. It was against GP. And what he did was he allowed Tony to get to the paint, but then he collapsed. And so Tony would get in sometimes too deep, and he wasn't able to kick the ball out and things of that nature. Now, that was a long time ago, 10 years. Tony's developed a mid-range game now. If anything, you got to prepare for the third and fourth pick and roll, not the first two, because the first two are the probing aspects of what Tony wants to do. Then that third pick and roll, that's when he's attacking now, and usually guys die on the pick and roll by that second or third one, and he goes into whatever he's going to do. But I think length still bothers Tony. I think length, like a Nicholas Batum, especially Nicholas knows him. He's a teammate of his in the national team of France. So I think if you can get someone like that on Tony, or even, this might be one of those opportunities where you play someone that's going to, okay, look, I know we used you for offense quite a bit last series, but we really need you to kind of hone in on what Tony's doing, because that's, everyone knows that the Spurs go the way Tony goes. And then if I'm Portland, I'm really making even more of a preparation for Manu Ginobili, because he was 0 for the last game, but he still has such an effect on the game because he's required to do different things as compared to what some of the other guys are doing. So I think there is an opportunity for Portland, but you definitely have to bring the energy and the fight to the game this time as compared to the one before.
Yeah, in that game one, it's funny because I'm with you. Like, I think you can put Batum on Tony Parker and see where that gets you. But when he's running, like you said, when he's running off those pick and rolls or if you're help, he's just going to keep running screen rolls for the first 15 seconds or 20 seconds. 20 seconds probably too long. 15, 18 seconds until you either are forced to switch or until you get a terrible matchup. Like, if you don't force the ball out of Tony's hands, he's going to find a matchup that's favorable for him, and it might not matter who's on him initially. So it's going to be a tough challenge for Portland. To me, Portland has to score with San Antonio. They have to try to get up there in the 110s, 1-teens, and see if they can limit San Antonio enough to win those games. And that was more surprising to me than the fact Tony went off. I mean, heck, Tony Parker can go off in any given game, and he has for his last two. But what was surprising to me was how easily the Blazers were taken out of their offense, whether it be denying Damian Lillard the ball to start the possession, or, and this is where I think some inexperience comes from, later in rounds, is they were, I guess, not aggressive enough, not forceful enough when they had chances, whether it be in the post or really wanting to punish, Wesley Matthews wanted to punish a smaller guy in the post. They seem to settle. They seem to not go for the higher percentage shot because they're, been so good at scoring or adept at putting the ball in the basket against the Houston Rockets. So I think they needed a bit of a wake-up call here. But if you're Portland and let's say Damian Lillard starting the offense isn't necessarily going to work out because San Antonio's going to do everything they can to deny that, where do you go? Where do you go? Is it as simple as saying, hey, LaMarcus, go get me some points? Or do you have to maybe start and say, hey, Wes Matthews, you have to be more aggressive running that pick and roll, or bring in Mo Williams and go 2 point guards, Mo and Damian Lillard, and then whichever one is not, getting denied the basketball, he starts the offense. What are the options for Portland here if you were coaching them? I'm making you a coach today, Bruce. I hope that's okay.
That's all right. I would go with the shot selection in the half court. We're not going to be able to get these quick shots. I know that they are an athletic team and they like to get up and down, Izzy, but I think shot selection will be key. Let's make San Antonio play some defense a little bit and then get our opportunities in transition when we get stops. I think that's key. I don't think you take the ball out of Lillard's hands. I think you can go through LaMarcus a lot more. You don't want necessarily Batum running pick and rolls, or even Wesley Matthews for the most part. And you don't want them having a lot of that. You want them to react and attack. Their reaction is off of what Damian Lillard is trying to do. And more or less, let's utilize Damian Lillard now more as a decoy now, as far as if we get him going to the basket or utilize him in the pick and roll, let's try to get that skip corner pass for Nicholas Batum or even Wesley Matthews when it comes to just giving them something different, because everyone's keying in on Damian Lillard and LaMarcus Aldridge. I don't like necessarily bringing Mo into the starting lineup because now defensively you really worry about what he's going to do, especially with a more active Kawhi Leonard. So I think you continue to keep it going that same way, but now let's really focus on in our half court. I know you might have a quick shot early in that shot clock. I don't necessarily want that young team to take it. I want them to try to make San Antonio move from side to side as far as defense is concerned.
Yeah, I'm not necessarily advocating starting Mo Williams, just maybe playing them together a little bit more. Mm-hmm. So, Yeah, but, you make a pretty decent coach, Bruce. I think you're handling these playoff adjustments pretty well right now. Again, just like with Miami, while I think the Spurs have the upper hand, like if both teams play to their potential, the Spurs will still come out on top in this series. But I do think Portland has a significant step forward to take. Like they can go 2-3 levels better than they did in this game. I think they were a little bit overwhelmed from the very beginning. You're not going to see a Mo Williams shoot 3 of 11. You're not going to see a Batum go 3 of 12. You're not going to see Wesley Matthews just settle and take himself sort of be a non-factor offensively. Hopefully we'll see more competitive games in this one. But I think, as you would expect, at least from a team that hasn't really been in the second round, and this group hasn't been in the second round of the playoffs, you would think that early on the Spurs would have the advantage, and that was pretty evident there. But we'll see how these 2 games play out. We'll see if we have a couple of series that get more competitive, or we'll see if Miami and San Antonio continue the blowout route, which is what they started taking when these series began. But that's going to do it for this edition of the NBA Lockdown Podcast. For the coach, Bruce Bowen, I'm Israel Gutierrez. We will talk to you again tomorrow.